Welcome to the Lights, Camera, Action Entertainment Reviews Podcast.
Who are you?
I'm no one.
Our Star Wars The Complete Saga retrospective comes to an end.
We lost our son. Forever.
We can still save him.
The lightsaber to strike true. And now, foolish child, he ignites it and kills his true enemy.
On this episode,
At last,
we will be discussing and reviewing
my boy.
Star Wars, the sequel trilogy.
I have been every voice you have ever heard. Inside your head.
This episode will contain spoilers.
Hatred, your anger. Hear me, and my spirit will pass into you. As all the Sith live in me, you will be Empress. We will be one.
Just let it in.
And now, here are your hosts for this retrospective. Mike Winkler, Alister Englehart, Dan English, and Jeremy Larson. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Star Wars Complete Saga retrospective. We have reached the final episode in our retrospective. The much-loved, much-beloved, much-controversial sequel trilogy. This one is the one I've been most looking forward to because I know it's going to be one hell of a debate, especially with one Jeremy Larson down there. I know he's got some really good things to talk about here. So Mike Winkler here, and with Alister Englehart returning, and Jeremy Larson, and Dan English is back. Welcome back, Dan.
Hey, thanks.
I wanted to start out the show and allow Dan to give some of his original trilogy thoughts for a few minutes, just so people can kind of get his outlook on things.
Sure, yeah. So for me, the original trilogy was my first exposure to Star Wars because my dad was a fan, and I'm pretty sure he had them on Betamax, and then when those VHS remasters came out. Yeah. And so that I don't remember my first time watching Star Wars. That's one thing that I don't know if that means I'm a fan or, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't have that memory of having seen it for the first time. But I always use that as my center when I'm thinking about Star Wars. My first experience there, the music. And so revisiting them as I get older has been interesting because I've realized I don't necessarily love the writing, and as I show them to my friends, you know, how they experience the dated graphics. But all in all, I think that they tell a really cool story, and maybe there's parts where the execution isn't amazing, but I like the themes and I like the story, and I think it was pretty fertile ground for good fan development for a number of years. I mean, a lot of my favorite video games have come out of the Star Wars franchise. So yeah, I mean, you won't find a critic of the original trilogy in me, but there are things about the other trilogies that I like better or less.
Sure.
But I think it's a good mix because I think the prequel trilogy has a great story that in my opinion is executed poorly, and the original trilogy has a really good story that I think is executed pretty well. And then when you get to the trilogy we're going to talk about today, I think the music, the effects, Some of the concepts that they introduce are phenomenal. I loved them. But the story behind them, I find, is really lacking overall in terms of novelty or originality. And so they kind of all swivel. And so the original trilogy is the sweet spot for me of nostalgia and story and execution. So that's my take. Sorry I couldn't be with you guys last time, but I'm ready to talk about the sequels.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah, that was perfect insight. I think we got the generalized version of what you would have been talking about, which I think you were on the same page as a lot of us were. I mean, we pretty much were probably in the same ballpark there.
10.
So, you know, with the sequel trilogy, before we go dive into The Force Awakens, I guess some general thoughts in general on it. I think we all agree that the general problem with the sequel trilogy is, of course, that there wasn't a full coherent story through all three. There wasn't a plan. That was Disney's biggest problem with their whole directors and changing all that stuff with issues. And that goes back to Disney throwing out Lucas's original sequel trilogy plans, which to me, I mean, I understand they wanted to go the more nostalgia route, of course, but to just literally go and throw out his treatments, I thought was kind of insulting. And especially since Kathleen Kennedy was the one that took over Lucasfilm because Lucas put her in that position, and she kind of almost spit in his face for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the movies seem to be disjointed. And I've talked about this in our previous retrospectives. Maybe it was on or off air, but it seems as though, as if I sum all three up, one lacks originality, and it's like, even to the intro scene where important information gets passed to a droid who will then relay it to the Resistant. It's just, it feels nostalgic in that way, and I'm like, this feels familiar, but there's really nothing risky or original or unpredictable, which is a larger problem I have with Disney remakes in the modern era to begin with. But the second one, I do applaud it for being unpredictable and original. But then again, with all the politics behind the scenes, you can definitely feel that there's not a collaborative story arc happening. It's these plot elements almost fight against one another, and in some cases even need explaining, like in the third one when referencing Rey's relation to the Palpatine family. They were like, I didn't lie, you know. They had to make up for this appearing contradiction between the canons of the three movies. So I think the disjointed nature of them makes them hard to appreciate as a trilogy, even though there's disparate elements in each of them that I really like quite a bit.
I'm going to come out and I'm going to say it. I'm going to feel like the sequel trilogy was made as though, like, if you look at EA making the Star Wars games and everything, it came out as a game, but it came out unfinished. The movie came out unfinished, where you needed to get downloadable content to understand what was truly happening in the movies. That's kind of how I feel the entire sequel trilogy is presented out. You're not given enough information in the time that they've given you. You have to go out and search for the information in other things.
Well, on that note, even, I felt like there was too much of a conversation with the fan base. That's always it's a political aspect of movie making that I'm always so conflicted about, because I appreciate the fans' abilities to invest more time and maybe energy and creativity into the series as some of the workers. Like Lost is a great example. The fan base was just full of great ideas and responsive, and they are almost guardians of the lore in a certain sense. And so while I want people to interact with the fan base, or at least acknowledge them, because not doing so produces things like Last Airbender, M. Night Shyamalan's Last Airbender. Exactly, like the groans. But I felt like The Last Jedi was almost had a punch list of fan theories that its objective was to bury. And so it was like all of these moments manufactured that I felt like if you had spent any time looking into what might happen, it was really just the story writers saying, nope, that's not it. That's not it either. And this doesn't matter. And so it felt really abrasive to me watching. And part of me liked that because it was so unpredictable, but it hasn't aged well with me. Over time, I've become a little bit turned off by how aggressively it chopped off some of those story arcs.
Sure.
You know, I remember back when we talked about the Rise of Skywalker on its own, that one of the things that I had mentioned was that the first time watching through, I hadn't perceived Rey's wrestling with the dark side, and now as I watch it through again with Aaron, I realize, because you had brought that up, Dan, how it was pretty clear to you when you were watching it that she had been wrestling with it, and I see it a lot more clearly now. I think I just must not have been paying as much attention my first time through, but I would say that I enjoy much more the extent to Rey's wrestling with the dark side than I feel like Luke really. I don't know that he really wrestled with it to the extent that she did. It doesn't seem to me. Like he definitely has moments,
maybe off screen.
maybe off screen. And Aaron and I actually just recently rewatched, in anticipation of Rise of Skywalker, we watched Luke's interaction with the Emperor at the end of Return of the Jedi, just to kind of frame Palpatine again.
Okay.
And it was interesting to see, just Palpatine, and I go back to some thoughts from the prequels. He is just such a master liar. He's so good. He's for me. I continue to love Palpatine's character throughout all 9 movies because he is just such a consistent character and consistently well done. But anyways, I really have enjoyed watching Rey's wrestling the second time through as I'm watching it with Aaron. It's good.
That scene with Luke comes to mind where she's on the island and she's like, it was trying to tell me something.
You went straight to the dark.
Yeah, he's like, you didn't even try to fight it.
I didn't see you there, is what she
I found it really compelling. And those are the things I really liked. I was ultimately disappointed in Luke's character because, as you mentioned, Alistair, he was so stout of heart in the first trilogy. He just, it came time for him to be tempted, and not only did he resist temptation, but he was able to carry himself in a way to bring Vader back to his humanity and back to the light side.
Yeah.
So then at the end of it, we're left with this discouraged hermit, withdrawn, cynic, which he almost, just the way he talks about the Jedi Order and how they fumbled leading into the Empire seemed not to be his view, and so I was saddened to see him such a cynic, and I didn't see that happen. So it was like, wait, where did this come from?
Well, I was gonna say, would you all say you were disappointed with the script writing in that sense, the way they portrayed Luke, or just disappointed with the arc of Luke's life?
The arc for me.
The arc, yeah, I'd say so too.
I've looked at it in a different way now. Initially when I saw the movie, I kept thinking, Luke almost feels like he's out of character in a way that Rian Johnson wrote him so out of character that it didn't feel right. I mean, I started thinking about more and more, okay, if I had gone through what he went through, would I have done something similar? Perhaps. But now that I've thought about this today and watching The Last Jedi the last couple days, I realized, have you guys noticed that Luke's journey with Last Jedi is very similar to Obi-Wan going into hiding? I mean, there are so many similarities because
look at Yoda too.
Yeah, because Obi-Wan goes into hiding because the Empire is rising and he failed Anakin and he has to go into hiding to hide the children. Luke goes into hiding because he failed Han and Leia's kid and he feels so guilty that he goes into hiding. It's very much a page out of Obi-Wan's playbook.
Everything comes around full circle. That's the thing. He's following in the footsteps of the people who trained him.
Yeah, and I think that it seems to me that the way he has chosen to cope with his guilt is to eventually, after however many years he was out on the island stewing in this shame that he feels, he's eventually come to attempt to displace it and to place the blame not on himself but on the Jedi.
The Jedi Order,
And that actually, as I was rewatching with Aaron, I remember the first time I watched it, I was actually really frustrated with the burning of the tree scene, and I didn't catch the end of Last Jedi where they show the books. And I thought that the entire, I guess the entire view of the Jedi, including Yoda himself, was kind of this discarding of tradition, throwing off the shackles of tradition and the Jedi religion, in an effort to assume the Force as it should be assumed. And I was thankful this time around that I noticed that Rey actually had the books, and that interaction between Yoda and Luke was far more localized to just something going on between Yoda and Luke. And I don't know yet really exactly why Yoda would give Luke that impression, what he felt he was giving Luke in that moment by allowing him to believe that the books were being burned along with the tree. But I was grateful that at the very least he was not sending a universal message that those things were not of value, because I'm assuming he knew that Rey had taken the Jedi books already.
Well, in Rise of Skywalker, they show that scene where when she's on looking through the books in Rise of Skywalker, she finds the Sith Wayfinder. Now, I take it the Sith Wayfinder was in the Jedi text, correct? Luke put them in text, because that's what it appears like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dig into The Force Awakens. What's some general thoughts on that?
I like The Force Awakens better than I like the other two. I feel like it was better. Again, kind of like A New Hope. It's the beginning of things, just sets everything up. I like the idea. I think Finn is my absolute favorite character of just The Force Awakens. I can't say the same about the other two movies because I think his character was underutilized and it treated poorly. Like, I feel like it was just, there was nothing that he gained after the entire experience.
Right. I agree with you there. I think that goes back to the combative nature of the plot elements. Finn, I felt really hopeful to be maybe a romantic interest for Rey, for him to have been a martyr character or a potential Force. Yeah, there was talk after he wielded the saber that he was Force sensitive, and that was why he was, maybe more empathetic or whatever. And so, yeah, I agree that there were a few characters, I think Rose was one of them, who were introduced and just they didn't get
cast off.
Yeah, they didn't get to play an important role, so they ended up being less of a character.
I will say at the beginning of Force Awakens, when Kylo Ren stops the blaster bolt in midair, one of the coolest things I have seen in the Star Wars movie.
Yeah. Yep. I saw that movie also in 3D.
Oh, man.
3D, the bolt was like hovering in the theater, and you could touch it as the camera panned. It was very cool because I had watched it. I think I watched it with my dad first, and it was not 3D. And then I saw it again in 3D, and you're just like, whoa, that is awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to say, Kylo Ren is my favorite character throughout. I think if there's one person, he and Rey are pretty much the most stable. And despite the things going on in the universe, I think their arcs still show pretty well as this dyad in the Force, that they kind of are constantly opposing one another or weaving through some balanced center. And I just love how angry he is. I love how powerful he is. And I love how complex he becomes, though that development starts to happen in the second film. But I mean, even starting from when he kills his father, like just he carries the tension of his character so well, and I like Adam Driver as an
he's
actor
fantastic.
also. So
Yeah.
it's just everything comes together for Kylo Ren. Yeah.
I've grown to like Adam Driver very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got the journey that I think throughout all three films that just feels, it feels like it was a plan. There doesn't seem like there's too many holes in his development through all three movies.
Yeah.
I know the one thing that I thought going into Rise of Skywalker was I had this feeling that they were going to find a way to try to redeem him. And I kept thinking, how are they going to make me feel like this is earned? You know, he killed Han Solo. How am I going to feel like this works? And I thought, son of a bitch. I saw Rise of Skywalker. I'm like, I cared. I bought it. I felt guilty. Then he dies. And I'm like, you know, just 2 hours ago, I wanted this guy to die so badly. Then when he dies, I'm like, damn you, J.J. Abrams.
Him killing Han Solo is a very complex moment in the movie for me personally, because I'm so conflicted, knowing, I mean, external to the movie, I knew Han Solo wanted to die ever since the original trilogy. Harrison Ford was like, you got to kill me. And so part of me felt like Han Solo, to a degree, it's hard to say what he wanted for his son there. I mean, he was not a conventional force-loving, you know, Jedi Order is all that. He was a little bit of a scoundrel. And so the fact that he was there to help his son, part of me says, did he want Ben to do whatever he thought would make his path the easiest? Did he care about the first order versus the resistance? And I know, obviously, at the end of the day, he wanted his son to come back to the light. But I couldn't help but feel that conversation was ambiguous enough that neither of them really knew what they wanted in that moment.
Yeah. True.
It's understandable.
Of course, they pin it really nicely in The Rise of Skywalker.
Sure.
And that settles that ambiguity. But I just liked that conflict there.
Yeah, I think, Jeremy, you had said that Kylo grew on you. I think that's probably how I describe it as well. I didn't really like Adam Driver the first time I watched the trilogy, but now as I know how his story ends, I find myself able to rationalize some of the things that bothered me the first time through, like his stoicism. He's a very stoic actor. At least how he plays Kylo Ren. Like there's moments where he's just talking very stoically. There's not much emotion either way on his face. And I think that now, as I know, I to me that feels like the face of conflict. It's because he doesn't know what he feels in a lot of those moments.
Sure.
And doesn't know how to process it. So he's just staring. He just has this like cold stare as he's talking to people. And it just makes a lot more sense now, and I've really enjoyed him much more the second time through.
Well, and he bears such he bears such intensity to me. Like when he's talking to Rey in their little Force moments, and he's like, "Say it." Yeah, I don't know, just the way that he feels like he has. I don't know. He has the answers in that he doesn't necessarily have the answers or the loyalties. I mean, he's an impressive character insofar as he decides to kill Supreme Leader Snoke or whatever that guy's title is. He's open-minded in that sense more than any of them, you know?
Well, I can agree with you, Dan, on the fact that I think Adam Driver steals 8 and 9. I think he steals both those movies. I think he really is basically the best parts of those movies, because Kylo's character in 8, you start to really learn more about him. Because in 7, he kind of came off kind of whiny and pouty.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he was unlikable in a way. But then 8 and 9, you start to see the internal struggles within him and why he is the way he is. By the time we get to 9, we really, truly understand him. I think he's the most understandable character in the sequel trilogy.
I will admit that when I first saw Adam Driver, I didn't know who was playing Kylo Ren before I went and saw the movie. I didn't look at the cast of characters to know what they looked like and whatnot. So I kind of wanted the reveal of Ben Solo's face to impact
His
me more
big
than it
old
did.
nose.
he had a baby face feel to me, and
Yeah,
I'd
agree with that.
Like I left the theater watching it. I'm like, I expected more of a reveal.
Yeah.
I go
The
back
hair
and
was
I go,
surprising too. The hair, when he took the mask
Yeah.
off, the hair was like, I was like, what the hell is
I
this?
see. You guys are crazy. I loved it. And I don't know. Maybe he's one. Maybe he's one of like my celebrity man crushes. But I just thought he did a great job, and he looked unique. Like he's not square jawed or traditionally handsome in any sense.
Yeah.
But he just, I don't
It's a
know.
Dan.
It's much better when he had a scar.
Well, so okay, this is one thing. Wasn't there controversy about the scar placement based on the trailers?
Ryan Johnson
really?
slightly altered his scar placement. So if you watch in 7 where his scar is, then you watch in 8, you'll notice that the scar shape's a little different.
Yeah.
And some people have said it's because if you look at the beginning of Last Jedi, he has that like bandage kind of on that scar, that blackish kind of. The droid fixes him. The droid fixes him in Last Jedi, which is kind of like that bandage kind of thing.
Yeah.
There is a slight difference, and I don't understand. Ryan Johnson said before the movie came out that he was going to do that. I don't really remember what his explanation
Well,
was.
so I think because it went across the face, and he had said that he wanted it to go through the eye.
Nice.
And I think it's just a perfect example of not being on the same page with your team. Like
That's his biggest issue. Yep.
I'm calling multiverse.
Well, we'll get into that conversation because there's that veil of the Force discussion too.
Yeah, I saw that. So I mean, if you are handed a canon, I don't care what you think about it. If you're going to change it drastically, you better have a reason or at least a good explanation. Yes.
Agreed.
It's like the senseless changes are nothing more than ego or maybe political motive to me. Like, get outside of yourself. And
it's like, I'm in charge of a Star Wars movie. I'll make the changes I want.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
To heck with your canon.
Versus people that are aware of the thing being bigger than themselves.
Well, that's I read watched an interesting video on YouTube, and there's this guy. He really dissects productions and finds out the issues of why things are done the way they're done. And of course, right now the big conflict is about Kathleen Kennedy getting the boot because there's been a lot of things that she's been trying to drive her political agenda into the films. And if you look at all the directors she's had a problem with since it started. She fired the Solo directors and brought in Ron Howard. She had issues with the Rogue One director. He ended up finishing it. But she even had problems with Abrams a little bit. But if you look, the one director she never had a problem with was Ryan Johnson. And that's because he agreed with her political agenda and he wanted to put those into the film. And she had no disagreements with him whatsoever.
I don't know too much about what are some of the themes of that agenda. I'm not abreast of this whole topic.
I think so I don't know because I haven't done the backstory, but I'm going to try and identify one of them from a viewer's perspective. The casino planet felt like its own little, story shell that had, I think, the most political themes of the movie. And I'm not saying whether they're bad or not. The whole rescuing animals, that's a great theme. I like that. But it felt somehow detached from the story in a way that made it a separate thing,
Yeah, that was probably one of my least favorite parts of Last Jedi.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Oh, so you hate animals.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to bring up about that is that The Last Jedi is a Star Wars movie trying to grow up. Like, you know how you look at like Harry Potter films and how they grew up with its audience.
Yeah.
They were trying to make the audience of Star Wars grow up from just a science fiction, shoot 'em up sort of thing into kind of a very serious topic sort of sounding thing. And it's like it's like having a kid who's wanting like macaroni and cheese, and then you suddenly feed them steak out of nowhere. It's giving them something too grown up. They're just not going to like it.
Yeah, but it's almost like jump scares in a movie. It's like, if you're going to mature your themes, earn it. I mean, look at the way that Harry Potter did it in such a successful way through natural elements. Hey, here's an idea.
Airbender.
If you want to mature your audience, how about you do something other than some nameless, bland, black-clad villainy, you know? Like, stop with the rank and file and introduce some complexity in your villains. That'd be a way to mature your audience. Look at how Marvel fans had to wrestle with increasingly complex and believable and winsome villains. I mean, more and more you're like,
Civil War.
Is he wrong?
Yeah.
Who's the bad guy here? And so I mean, even Thanos, half the internet seems to think that he had a noble cause.
Right.
Yeah, on the fence.
But yeah, and so
gosh.
I don't like when it feels like the ideologies are just injected.
They're forced.
Yeah. And, like, I have no problem with some sort of bourgeoisie, rich, anti-capitalist theme if you build it and structure it and it's
just
compelling.
don't jerk us into it.
Just don't throw us into this casino scene and pour this ideology all over it, and then that's it. It's pretty much totally isolated, although I do love Benicio del Toro and I think he did a great job.
Was it the code? The code?
Yeah, that was the code breaker.
The casino scene just feels like a plot device. It doesn't feel like it served any purpose. I mean, even the code breaker in the general sense, I love Benicio del Toro, but the code breaker even serves no purpose because he doesn't. There's really no end result for him. He doesn't even come back. Everybody thought, he might come back in Rise of Skywalker and play a crucial part. No, he doesn't come back. Right. He feels like a throwaway character that was thrown in for to put a big name actor in there just for the sake of, look who it is, Benicio del Toro.
Yep.
You know, and but you're right.
What a believable stutter.
Right.
Well, the stutter was excellent.
Yeah.
But back to what you said, Dan, about how the fact is it had to be earned. And that's something you can't do in a series that's already 8 movies in. You cannot just all of a sudden just change the narrative. I mean, if you're 2 movies in, 3 movies in, okay, maybe you can change it if you're going in that direction, like Harry Potter. You're going in that direction where you're gradually getting to that point. But to do it just for, I got this movie, it's my touch, I'm going to do it now. It's like, why don't you wait to do it with your own trilogy that you were given by Kathleen Kennedy, even though now I don't think his trilogy is even going to happen. But
I back to me kind of being probably most frustrated with that particular scene. I think that for me, it comes down to if you're directing a film, you have to really think long and hard about how can you use every minute to its best effect.
that's exactly
And
it.
I think there are other aspects of the story that, as fans, we wanted actually to have more of an explanation, have more development. And so it's just a very strange thing to take precious minutes. I think there's probably at least 15 to 20 there that probably could have been used elsewhere much more effectively.
Well,
So,
and there was like a
it's
weird democratization of this Force too. Like, I don't know, like all those orphan boys in that scene and how at the end they were Force users too.
At least the one.
That never comes back into play either in Rise of Skywalker.
And so
I
I
guess
guess
he'll have his own TV show.
I guess hanging moments like that are just, they show the side of movie making that I don't like, which is that things have to be filtered through a political process. And I don't even mean political ideologies. I just mean the nature of businesses making movies. They make decisions for various reasons. And so in a perfect piece of art, I don't think you'd have truncated storylines without the artist intending for those to be cut short, you know.
It's filmmaking at its worst.
And so
It's ugly.
I think that it just goes back to the theme of the whole trilogy is the passing around the directors, the incoherent story arcs, just they didn't play nicely together, and we got to see some of that. Which I think segues nicely, Mike, into the talk about the Veil of the Force and the reboot. What is that?
I don't know, this whole thing is really interesting. I don't think Disney's going to go there. I don't think that they're gutsy enough to do it because they'd be admitting failure. And Disney's not going to admit failure unless it's blatantly obvious. And there's a lot of lovers of these films, so they know that if they were universally hated, they might be able to get away with it more so, but they're not universally panned or hated.
Yeah.
Well, this Veil of the Force kind of thing is supposed to be something out of, I think, Rebels.
Yeah.
Rebels had an episode where they showed the Veil of the Force and that Palpatine existed, where I guess that when he fell down the Death Star, he fell into the Veil of the Force and he entered into a parallel alternate universe, which is supposed to be the sequel trilogy, and that's why he, quote-unquote, survived.
Ooh.
Which is not a bad theory, but at the same time, it's kind of like, we've only seen it in a cartoon series. We haven't seen it in the films. And the fact is, a lot of people follow the films. It's the same mistake that the novelization of Rise of Skywalker just recently made. Everybody keeps saying about how, is Palpatine a clone? Did he survive? Well, now, in the novelization, they wrote that Palpatine is in fact a clone, and that Rey's father actually is a Palpatine clone, and that Rey is an offspring of a Palpatine clone. So therefore, Palpatine is dead, but he somehow created an offspring that's also a clone of him.
Yeah.
It's more confusing what the movie provides. And the movie providing is simple. I look at it this way. I'm going with the fact that Palpatine somehow survived. Because that's what the movie basically gives
I like that perspective.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's challenging when filmmakers expect a really high investment of the fan base into TV shows. Yeah, that to me, like I enjoyed that it's there's a lot of supplemental material that I really like that fills in some of the lines, but I think the moment when the story doesn't make a lot of sense unless you watch the TV show, I think that's where it kind of gets too much. But interestingly, I actually heard in opposition to the multiverse that there's talk of Lucas's trilogy being concurrent to the sequel trilogy elsewhere in the galaxy, and I think that would probably be a lot easier to handle, because one of the issues they talked about with the multiverse is not only the issue of they're introducing the idea of a multiverse, but also needing to have other actors and actresses play characters that we're familiar with, which would just be strange.
Yeah, that'd be worse.
Yeah, but yeah. So I'm interested to see. I think that the alternate would be a lot more doable. I think pretty cool.
Yeah.
So about the Veil of the Force, I feel like there was a lot of talk of death as a vehicle to greater power from Palpatine. Yoda
Obi-Wan
talks about Qui-Gon even, and Obi-Wan says it to Darth Vader,
strike
right?
me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, well, and then I think...
You sounded just like him.
I know, that was really good.
That was really good.
Qui-Gon, it's Yoda or Obi-Wan even talks about Qui-Gon, like, merging with the Force. So I am really intrigued, and that is one of the tendrils of story that they pushed that I enjoyed most, was just exploring an unknown aspect of things that we've heard talk about, rather than having another planet killer.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to see more of pushing out the lore. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean characters and story arcs as much as I mean like realities of their universe.
I think we'll probably see more of that in the Obi-Wan TV show. Again, forcing you to the show.
Well, and even Mandalorian, I thought, did a great job of,
oh my gosh,
you don't really follow anyone other than the Mandalorian for the whole series, but they're just constantly exposing you to maybe things you heard about, or and Clone Wars does a great example of that too. A lot of the characters I saw on the Slag planet, I forget its actual name, at that the Separatists meeting with Dooku, when I watched the real life movie, I'm like, man, I'd love to see more of these characters. Some of them look so interesting, like the steampunk guy, and then you watch Clone Wars and you do get to see some of that. So I liked that.
Man, we really got away from Force Awakens, didn't we?
We did. We went into the Last Jedi real quick. I think it's because there's not much to really hate on Force Awakens for. There's really not. It's if you love A New Hope, you love a Force Awakens because there's a lot of similarities between the two.
Yeah, that's true.
I loved the Star Killer base.
To
me it makes sense to me. I think some people argue that it was too close to the Death Star. I think it would have been probably challenging when you think about it for the First Order to develop a drastically different technology in such a short amount of time to the effect that the Star Killer base was able to accomplish.
Within the frame that they forced the trilogy into, I agree that that's the best choice.
Mm-hmm.
But look at how fun the remnants of the system of the Empire has dissolved officially, but they still have the resources and connections and military power to exert control over planets. And it's almost worse. It reminds me of Asimov's Foundation trilogy, where they talk about this period of chaos after the fall of the Empire, and how Terminus is just going to become the center of chaos for thousands of years. That would have been pretty cool. I liked Mandalorian's exploration of that.
There's no longer any false pretense of being this ordered, structured society.
Well, and so the Empire, we could have really gotten into this nuanced look at the Empire's rule. Can we do more than just show that some of the Imperial stormtroopers are empathetic and want to defect? I think it would have been great to see, I don't know, just like a more nuanced look. Like, are there parts of the Empire that aren't just ruling with an iron fist and are actually trying to help people? Or
sure.
But the story was pigeonholed into Empire's gone, First Order has risen. Where from? I don't know. I think the villains deserve more because Palpatine's such a great villain, and it makes sense why they brought him back.
And I think Palpatine explained it really good in this prequel trilogy, where he said good is a point of view. It can't always be Empire good or Empire bad, Rebellion good sort of thing. Because if you look at Luke from a civilian point of view, he's a terrorist that blew up a station full of 1 million people.
Yeah,
you're looking at just a view of everything.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think that's the nuance that the prequel trilogy was brave enough to go into, to look at how the Empire was born out of the Republic, and look at how the Separatists are kind of right, but also kind of wrong. And I mean, we don't even have 3 parties fighting each other anymore. It's just the Resistance and the First Order. But the prequel trilogy expanded those political parties and said, well, there's not just 2, there's 3. And by the way, they're birthing new ones and schisming all the time. And that was interesting to me. And that's the kind of world building that I think the sequel trilogy really failed at.
It lacked so much. It felt very chaotic, like you were talking about. Just didn't make any sense of why these two were fighting, why the Resistance had to suddenly be out of everything.
Yeah.
I have to speak well about it, though. It was beautiful. Go ahead, Mike.
The problem is there's such a gaping hole between 6 and 7. There's so much story we don't see. We don't know how the First Order formed. We don't know how the Resistance had to form.
That's 10 years or 30 years.
30 years, and that's a pretty big hole of story. I mean, there wasn't even that much time between episodes 3 and 4.
It's going to be there's going to be a prequel sequel trilogy in the middle of the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy.
I'm all
there is a TV show about the Resistance, but it's not animated the same way as Clone Wars or Rebels.
Yeah, it's different.
I haven't watched it, but it is interesting as I think about the leadership within the Empire versus the First Order. I do think that the the structure takes on the characteristics of the leadership to an extent. It's like, because
Mhm.
Hux and Kylo, and even Snoke to an extent, but especially Hux and Kylo to me are just very angry, iron fist men. Whereas the Empire is Palpatine, Tarkin, right? Like Tarkin's a great example of a nuanced leader who's very reserved and and Thrawn, even Thrawn. So I
Which I think we're
Empire,
finally going to see.
Yeah, I think the Empire had some different personalities, and I think that it is interesting to see how that kind of impacts the entire regime. But
well, there's that newfound thing coming out that somehow, some way, depending on who's going to run Lucasfilm here, because there's rumors going to be Dave Filoni, who's the showrunner for Clone Wars. There's Jon Favreau, who's running Mandalorian. And there's even rumors going around that Disney's considering asking George Lucas to step back in. And that would be interesting, because now there's talk that if he would in fact step in, or somebody comes in and wants him to do it, that he still wants to make his sequel trilogy treatments. So I guess maybe there could still be a trilogy within that 30 years that he could make that off of.
Yeah.
Of course, we can't see Leia now, which sucks because she's gone.
Yeah.
We can still see Luke, of course, but I mean,
I don't know. I'm
I
wondering.
would feel weird.
I'm wondering to the extent that they'll start meddling with CG to recreate these people's images. They've already shown that they can do it on, I mean, a pretty phenomenal scale. You could definitely tell that Leia was not Leia at the end of Rogue One, that was CG. But I had a pretty hard time telling that it was not Tarkin.
Yeah. I actually pointed that out to my wife after we watched Rogue One, and she goes, "No, are you kidding?"
Yeah.
Like, she had no idea that was all CG right there.
And some of and even more so, some of the deep fake stuff out there right now, where you actually have like the body of a real person, it's just the face is imposed. That stuff's crazy.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think once that starts getting employed on a scale that has Disney's budget, I think, I don't know, I picture a future where actors don't only sign over,
their faces.
Yeah, well, they sign over their likeness in that character. It's going to be weird, but...
You can have my face, but not my hands. No one's going to have these.
These are the money winner. These are the breadwinner. You cannot have these.
That goes right over my head, I got to be honest.
Not my birthmark.
Yeah, or how about you can take my head, but you can't take my hair? You can't take my head of hair. You can only take me if I'm bald.
Yeah. Sell different parts of your face.
Yeah.
My nose is 1 million.
Yeah, 1 million, 3 million, and the eyes 10 million.
This is a tangent for sure, but I remember when my dad and my brother and me went and saw the Final Fantasy movie in theaters.
Yeah, I remember that.
Spirits Within, I think it was called.
I like that movie.
Yeah, I liked it, but we were talking about just guessing on the future of movies and how there would be this shift away from actors maybe, and it would be about directors and writers. And I don't think it's really happened the way that we thought it might, but I think it might still happen.
Oh, for sure.
Sure, yeah.
We do love our celebrity characters, though.
In a way we do, it's true. Okay, well, since we kind of already went into Last Jedi, I think, to a pretty
and demolished it.
And found ways to...
See, I spilled water all over myself, by the way.
I see that.
Did
a
you
little
guys
bit
notice
of,
that?
I did. I didn't
It was
want to
the
say
last
nothing,
little bits of this, and I just dumped it on myself.
I will say, I in Last Jedi, I love when we finally see Rey starting to really manifest strong Force powers.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Love the ending where she's lifting all those stones. That's an awesome scene.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, there are some pretty cool moments in that
film.
And
I will stress, I think it's visually beautiful, and I think one of the most important plot elements that was continuous throughout was the connection between Kylo and Rey. And so the fact that they had, they were able to talk to one another, and he was like, "Can you see my surroundings?" I can't see yours, you know. But then they noticed like they could touch hands and they could, you
He's
know,
wet.
yeah, and so I thought that was
It's sticky.
It's sticky. I was just gonna bring that up.
the pacing of that was perfect for me, and because I had even heard after the Rise of Skywalker that some people felt that it came out of nowhere. Where was this magical transport technique? And I'm like, what? This has been building the whole trilogy. This is the most sensible move.
If there
of
was
the
any
entire arc.
continuity,
Yeah, it's that. And then I think visually it was awesome when what's that general's name?
Holdo?
Holdo. Yeah.
When she
demolished the entire fleet.
Yeah, by speeding
speed.
through it.
That was pretty
awesome.
badass.
And the
looked
physics of it was
beautiful.
really cool too.
And the sound was amazing.
It was stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you wonder why they didn't do that to the Planet Killer or.
Well, they explain it. They explain it, and they completely debunk it in The Rise of Skywalker, where they're just going, "Oh, that basically we couldn't do that right now because there was only so many variables to make that actually plausible."
Oh, okay.
That's why.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, okay, fine, okay, you just that idea's out.
But hey, at least they acknowledged that they opened up a gaping wide plot hole. What'd you say, Al? What'd you say, Alistair? I think you're muted.
Yeah, he's muted.
This is great radio, Alistair.
We can't hear you.
Sorry. My internet cut out.
Oh, what'd you
That's all
say?
right, that's all right.
Say it again.
Oh, I said the Force was strong with her in that moment. That's the explanation.
That's what we were waiting for. Oh man!
Wow,
What a
that was very
letdown.
anticlimactic. Thanks.
I loved the throne room with Snoke. I loved
thought that
the
scene was-
That's a
what are
really
they?
good scene.
Imperial throne guard, the red dudes.
Yeah, they're like Palpatine's guards. They're just Snoke's guards. If you notice, they're red, just like Palpatine's guards were, which
Yeah.
I guess makes sense as to him being Palpatine. That would actually all make sense.
Elite guards that actually know how to land a shot.
Yeah.
So, what do you guys think about Captain? Was it Phantasma?
I feel like she had just as much of a story as the Boba Fett and the Jango Fett arc.
Yeah.
It was someone who looked really cool.
Ooh,
She was shortchanged.
Ended up shortchanged.
Yep.
That's interesting. I didn't think of it as a parallel to Boba Fett.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted more because at the time that
gosh.
came out, I was still thick into Game of Thrones, and I just loved that actress.
Yeah, she's good.
But she never even got to take her helmet off.
Exactly.
And I
We
thought,
saw her
okay,
eyeball.
I thought she was going to get out somehow, escape. I didn't know, that was going to
That
be
was
the
it.
end for
It
her.
was truly unfortunate. I expected just as much from her as I expected from Django and Boba Fett.
Then as I was spending like $30 on a Captain Phantasma toy for my nephew, I'm like, oh, here it is.
Well, I would have thought for sure that JJ was going to bring her back because Rian Johnson killed her. Because I thought maybe he had more of a purpose for her. That I thought, okay, he's going to find a way to bring her back and fulfill the real purpose that he wanted her in Force Awakens for.
Yeah.
He didn't do that, which was very surprising. But I think one of my favorite parts of Last Jedi has just got to be Luke's moments at the end, because I mean the projection sequence and how he confronts Kylo is so beautifully shot too. And just what he does to him, and then Luke's death really is perfect. Looking at the sunsets from A New Hope, I think his death was very, very well handled. Even though his character is maybe a little out of place in Last Jedi, Rian Johnson did do the death justice.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's and he stayed dead too. So
Yeah, there was no redeeming factor there. I would have loved to have seen them try to pull that one off.
Well, I just appreciate it when deaths mean something. When a franchise establishes the idea that it's a loss that's worth grieving. And again, Game of Thrones, through their first 6 seasons, did a really good job of,
Jon Snow.
didn't know. No one was safe, and when they brought someone back, it was a shock.
Yeah.
At least I was shocked by that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I was worried they were going to wipe his death out too, and I'm glad they didn't because it was just too good of a death to wipe that out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're just in a place right now with TV and movies where a lot of characters, they don't have a substantial death and then they come back. Like, that is one of the things that really made me mad about The Rise of Skywalker. I will say that it was the two bait and switch of two very important essential characters, that with Chewbacca and with C-3PO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, what would the problem have been with, well, Chewbacca deserved a better death, but 3PO's death or brainwipe, that would have been
justified,
impactful.
Kind of like Data.
But the thing is that's the thing is that suddenly they were able to, they were able to reinstate his memories at the end. Like, it was just like, oh, okay, so that wasn't for good. Okay.
Is that the Disney touch?
Probably somewhere.
They can only give so many deaths per franchise.
I guess so.
I guess killing Ben was their quota.
Right.
One person. That's it.
Well, they killed off Leia in that one too,
and Solo.
Well, they didn't have a choice with that one.
Planet Earth killed off Leia in that one. They didn't. Yeah.
But it was just like they killed off all the main characters, and then the Skywalker line is just gone.
If there's one thing that really ticks me off, it's the fact that they killed off killed off the main characters one by one. Han in 7, Luke in 8, Leia in 9. Now, I don't know if Leia dying was always part of the plan for 9. We don't know that. I mean, I assume it probably was, because even her death made sense in Rise of Skywalker as to why she did it. It was a justifiable death, like Luke's. But, I mean, I think after Carrie Fisher died, I think Disney was thinking, oh, shit, we probably shouldn't have killed off Luke in 8.
Right.
I think they really dug themselves a hole there, and they just went too early.
Just bring him back as a Force ghost.
Well, I do think Carrie Fisher's death did damage to that series.
Sure.
In more ways than one for me. And I don't know if this is disrespectful, but I was never extraordinarily attached to her in the new series. I thought she was a pretty cool character in the early series, but I don't know, it felt like nobody really got cool Force moments. Well, I don't know. She did have that part where she flew back in from space.
Like Mary Poppins?
The Mary Poppins moment.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think they could have made her a little bit more
badass
of a general. I mean, she was a general of the Resistance.
Seems like too soft-spoken for what she was in the original trilogy.
Yeah, they
she was
over-feminized her. She was a brute in the original trilogy. But
that's the Kathleen Kennedy touch.
Well, she did.
We lost you, Al. We can't hear you again.
We lost you, Al.
We're going to come in with another line that we're just not going to like.
He's going to come in and say it's sticky.
Well, I'm going to keep talking, and when we can hear you again, Al, I want to hear what you have to say.
I'm not repeating it.
Okay.
No?
Ooh, there you go.
I said
Secret.
she did stun blast Poe while she still was in head bandages.
Yes.
True.
And
that's true.
Yeah. So basically, it was this. I don't know. There were moments that mourned her for so long, and I don't mean to. As I speak this, it sounds horrible, but I wasn't caught up in that because she didn't get the screen time that she deserved in a sense, and so I didn't feel overly attached to her because up until the Rise of Skywalker, she was a relatively auxiliary character.
It's funny you mentioned that because I read a very interesting article about that today, and they said the biggest glaring issue with Disney's trilogy is that they were so willing to be focused on the new characters that they kind of put the old characters in the background. And they said that maybe the new trilogy should have still followed Luke and could have had new characters in there, but not put the primary focus on them. That it should have kind of followed Luke's journey. Therefore, Leia could have been more part of that journey because it's a sister. And then, Han could have been thrown in there somehow, some way, because the whole son storyline could still have been there.
Right.
But that was the big mistake, that it should have followed the original character still and not put them in the background and basically toss them aside.
It should have been kind of like a handing off of the torch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It would have felt more. It would have felt better that way instead of just thrusting these new characters upon us and going, "Ooh, where are these people?" And then suddenly, oh yeah, nostalgia factor of throwing in a cameo.
Yeah. Well, what if they paced them so that we got to see Ben's training and his transition, and then the second one was dedicated to Rey's discovery and her initial conflict with Ben, and then the last one would have been Ben's death and redemption and Rey's maturation into the Force.
Makes
and
sense.
So that the first one could have really focused on those people. The one thing I had heard was that the conversation between Ben and his father was supposed to be, or their suspicion was that was supposed to be Ben's redemption moment with his mother.
Yeah.
And that he was going to come to peace with her physically, and be able to talk to not just a memory reconstruction or whatever Han Solo was, but have a conversation with his mother in which she forgave him, and that her grace toward him was one of the initiating factors of his redemption. Yeah. And I thought that was really cool. Ever since I heard that, I was just like, man, I wish that wasn't cut short.
Yeah. Agreed.
I get it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so since we're kind of already into Rise of Skywalker, we'll continue that discussion, of course. I think the biggest thing to discuss with Rise of Skywalker, of course, is going to be Palpatine. I mean, that's the most controversial part of Rise of Skywalker, is the return of him. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on the return of Palpatine? Do you buy into it? Think it was a good idea? Was it written well enough in there to really include him? Did it make sense?
I think it was a cop-out. I'm gonna say I'm gonna be very blunt about the Rise of Skywalker because it's my one of my least favorite. It's like right there with Attack of the Clones as my least favorite film. And I'm gonna say it because it was so much fan service. It was a vomit of nostalgia and fan service into one film, trying to bring all the fans back from what everyone thought was a disaster in The Last Jedi. And they tried to force so much new and so much nostalgia and not enough substance that it just comes off as way too bland. It doesn't come off as a good movie. It comes off as just, oh, remember this, and new stuff that completely destroys, The Last Jedi.
Yeah. And even I think the finality of the Return of the Jedi with Palpatine's death. I do come away, I loved that Palpatine came back, but I did come away with some very significant questions that I don't feel like have been answered, and I don't know how they're going to answer them. And again, what they're going to demand in terms of the investment of the fan base in order to answer very big questions. I think that they should have answered those in the context of the film. To me, when the Emperor fell, and I know I mentioned this in our first podcast, Mike, but I think there's a very clear release of dark side energy, and I even just rewatched it today, that I think is a very strong implication that Palpatine died. And so I think to reintroduce his character without a very clear explanation for how he came back from literally death, just as, I don't know, I think you're right, Jerry. I think it was kind of playing off nostalgia and assuming you could ride off that without giving a clear explanation for how it happened.
The one thing they could have done differently with Palpatine too is that, it would have been nice too if they would have dropped little hints, through 7 and 8 if they planned on doing that. There was something else I read about how this is, I don't know how true this is, but apparently somebody that worked on concept art for Rise of Skywalker, he said that while they were filming Last Jedi and J.J. Abrams was hired back on after the other director, Colin Trevorrow, was fired, that there was concept art being put together for Palpatine's return. Basically, they were planning it while Last Jedi was still being made. But if that's true, then I'd have to ask, well, then why didn't Rian Johnson throw in some little sprinkles of salt basically in there to get the hint at it. And that could be because Rian Johnson wanted to be stingy and picky. I mean, it would fit the narrative with him considering what he did to the movie. But to me, I feel like they're dropping these little leaks because they're trying to justify that there was always a plan to bring. Kathleen Kennedy was even quoted in saying that bringing Palpatine back was always the plan for this trilogy. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. They are going back. They are trying to retcon the mistakes they know they made, and they're trying to make excuses for them instead of owning up to them. And you were right, Alistair, that the biggest problem here is they bring Palpatine back. I loved the scene at the beginning, especially that line that he uses right out of Revenge of the Sith. It's that line gives me goosebumps still.
Yeah.
But to make that line a good enough explanation to how he survived, that is bullshit. That is bullshit, and it's frustrating because I thought I was going to read the novelization, get a better explanation, and that made it worse. That novelization made it worse.
So the investment that it demanded of you didn't even pay off.
No. I waited forever for the novelization, and it gave me a bullshit explanation about how Palpatine's a clone, and by the way, Rey's the offspring of another Palpatine clone.
That's strange. So that's canon that she was the offspring of a Palpatine clone?
See, now this is where the debate is, because a lot of people have said that they don't want to read the novelization as canon because the novelization does a bunch of different things. For instance, they say Rey and Ren's kiss at the end was nothing but a friendly relief of what this is. It's in no way. They use the actual words that it is in no way passionate. There is no love. They actually use those words. They are driving so hard to say it's not romantic at all. I don't buy that either. By watching with my own pair of eyes and their Force connection, that is not just some kind of relief. Oh, it's finally over. It's romantic. It's romantic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I agree. I loved the line that mirrored what Palpatine was saying to Anakin when he was trying to seduce him into the dark side of the Force. But as time goes on, I've become dissatisfied with simply repeating lines from the things I liked and letting that be connection enough to the canon. And so just like you said, it's almost an unearned thing. Like, you didn't write that line. You didn't write lines around it that conveyed an understanding of the lore you were expounding on. And frankly, you weren't expounding on the lore much. I liked that Palpatine came back. I thought that was a really cool idea.
Well, I like it too. I thought it was a great idea.
But it did so much damage to the existing storyline, because then all of a sudden you have this explanation of, well, then who the hell is Snoke? And why do we care? And where did he come from?
Yeah.
And the fact that they just had Snokes in these little test tubes, I was like, okay, I guess. Yeah, like
another cop out. It just no explanation.
It just, so then what? He was pulling the strings with this zombie force of the Empire that they've been there the whole time? Like, were these ships there? It doesn't.
I do have an issue with that.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you what it is.
Issue.
I'll tell you what it is. Okay, so if he was so far-reaching and connecting with, so supposedly he provided the Force connection for Rey and Ren, because Snoke said he did that. That obviously was Palpatine. So if Palpatine was able to do all these things, well, from what I saw, he was pretty damn weak. So how was he doing all this from across the galaxy? That just doesn't make sense.
He had quite a bit of followers, and I'd like to know, what were those? Were those clones?
Yeah.
Were those, the Dark Council? What?
But they all got disintegrated with the blast, so we can't ask them any questions.
So they're gone.
Boy, it's Lost Season 6 all over again.
Also, I have a problem with the Sith Wayfinder, or whatever it's called. Why not go with the canon and call it a Sith holocron, like it should be? I rewatched that scene and I'm going, no, I can't do it. Just stop.
I also thought it was funny. It was funny to me to see. It was funny to me in the beginning as I watched Kylo Ren very narrowly navigate the maze to get to the planet. and then
and then 1,000 rebel ships
and then
did it.
and then all of a sudden, instead of single file line, which you would expect of the rebel ships, they all emerge Avengers style.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty much.
The end of Endgame.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned Endgame because somebody pointed this out in a YouTube video. Okay, so at the end, when Rey is holding the lightsabers and he say, "I am all the Sith and I am all the Jedi," well, what does that remind you of? Iron Man.
I am
Iron
inevitable.
Yeah.
Right. That's the Disney touch again. And I don't know if that was Disney putting their touch on it or that was just.
So I had heard from a friend of mine who's like a movie crazy nut.
Like me? Oh boy.
Yeah, he just adds so much academic insight to it. He talked about Disney creating their movies in the storyboarding phase. They actually use scenes from other movies to talk about the moments and the feeling and the aesthetic that they want. And then they fill in the story to fit the feeling. And if you think about a heftier lore that requires a little bit more nuance and understanding, I think that bears out. You're like, well, gosh, why did all of these rebel ships appear when it's supposed to be hard to get to this exegol planet? Well, that's because that's the moment they wanted. And so that's the moment they got, because that was like this cool on your left moment when everybody warps in to show their support. And so I've been kind of disappointed when he revealed that to me, because I've seen the movie magic a little bit more in Disney movies. But I think that explains a lot of the moments that make less sense, is that they're really going for the aesthetic and the moment.
Hollywood ending.
Yeah, or even any scene, like the scenes between the people. Maybe someone said, oh, we need a scene like that scene in Apocalypse Now where they're talking, and I don't have
just use the same format.
Yeah.
Well,
and at the end of the day, they're a business. They're trying to not make money, and I think that's why they haven't done a lot of
riskier moves,
brave stuff. Yeah. I mean, of all the remakes of the Disney movies, I thought Aladdin is probably my favorite of the Disney classic remakes.
Hands down.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Aladdin very much. I thought it was very faithful to the cartoon, but it added its own little flair.
Yeah, and it took
like,
liberties.
It was like Aladdin meets Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and that's what you get with the remake.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, I think Genie was a big part of a spin on that movie, because he didn't try to be Robin Williams. He made his own character out of Genie, but still was faithful to Genie, versus like whoever the heck played Scar filling Jeremy Irons' shoes super poorly. So, and that's just the problem I've had with modern Disney movies, is they're not
what they used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've lost a little bit of their originality. They're going back to their original playbook, and they're just rehashing the same thing. And that's a Disney problem. And that's mainly because of who's in charge. Now, the CEO of Disney that was running all this, he's not the CEO no more. A new guy's been hired, and actually one of his first orders of business was wanting to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy, number one, and then number two, I know Alister and I talked about this on the Rise of Skywalker podcast we did. There is that long rumored director's cut of Rise of Skywalker that apparently is far superior, that they cut. From what I heard, there's a lot of things they cut, and one of the things they mainly cut was more explanation on Palpatine's return.
That would have made the film so much better.
Yeah, and that's why I watched this director's cut.
It would have been for the Star Wars fans. I think one of the challenges they face is trying to broaden their fan base, and so
sure.
It's kind of like the feeling I get of Star Trek. There's people who are hardcore Trekkies that seem dissatisfied with the modern remakes, and it might be because they've broadened it. I mean, the same thing's happening in video games too. You look at Elder Scrolls, it's gotten more and more accessible, which has made me less and less happy, because elements that I've really loved have started to get designed out for the
It's
sequel.
appealing to a general base, is what
Yeah.
it's
Well,
doing.
and
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if that plays out over generations. Like I feel like the original trilogy has the potential to play out over generations. Like, you know, I'll watch those with my kids and get Joel excited about them. You know, I think when you try to appeal to a larger demographic, you might not have as deep a roots as you would have otherwise.
Yeah. Well, it's like the
Yeah.
prequel trilogy now. It's gaining a newfound respect now. Respect that never
Yeah.
got all these years. And now people are finally looking at them and saying, you know what? These are not as, bad as I was trashing them on. I mean, I know Jeremy.
I'm
I
a
know Jeremy. I never
convert.
thought that way.
I'm a
never.
convert. And I think exposure, when you were exposed to them, because if it was the first Star Wars you interfaced with, especially as a kid, because I feel like I went through a hateful prequel trilogy mode just because it was,
The thing to do.
Yeah, well, just like retrospectively, that's maybe as I grew up, I felt like I aged out of it, whereas Harry Potter kind of aged with me. I don't know. It's hard.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many debates I had with people. I'm sticking up for the prequel trilogy, and it caused a lot of arguments and
Lost a lot of friends, Mike.
Well, no, it was a lot of friends, but I mean, the discussions got very, very heated, and as I always said, to this day,
Mike's
I
movie
stood up for
nights
him.
slowly had less and less people attending them.
Yeah, because like, I can't do that. I can't sit with somebody that justifies that. I'm thinking
he's got the prequels on his movie show.
Yeah, and I think, you know what? I look at them straight in the face and I say, you know what? You don't like the prequels, then you're not a Star Wars fan. That's my argument. And then I'm like, done.
So do you like the sequels?
Yeah, I still like the sequels. And like I said, I have a lot of problems with the sequel trilogy. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of Rise of Skywalker I still like. I agree with Jeremy that there is a lot of fan service in there, but there's still a lot of moments in there that I really love, that I can go back and still pick favorite moments, saga moments. Yeah. And the score is still amazing. I mean, the score gets you every time.
Yeah, the score is great. So I'm going to revitalize a discussion that Mike and I had on this that we actually came up on different sides on. I'm interested to hear Dan and Jeremy's thoughts. How'd you feel about Rey's taking the name Skywalker?
Hated it.
Wow, oh boy. Here's the debate of the show. We found it.
Hated it.
I think just like the rest of the trilogy, it was undeserving because she didn't even know who she was half of the time. You can't just suddenly decide you're a Skywalker. Like, I seen the memes like Spider-Man. Oh, we're using our made-up names now. Okay, I get it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to have that in contrast to the novelization claiming that it was an unromantic kiss, because I'll tell you, honestly, the first thing it made me think of when she said that was the end of Titanic when Rose takes
Jack's name.
Jack's name, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. But I thought the whole point of the movie was the redemption of the corrupted Palpatine name. Like, how much cooler would it have been if she was like, I'm Rey Palpatine? And like, to be a new era of that name. That would have been cooler, in my opinion. But
yeah,
I think it would have been cool if it wasn't the end of the saga. If it wasn't
she's
the end of
just
the
not
saga,
a Skywalker, though.
Well, I don't think it's so much about her being a Skywalker in general. It's so much that Leia and played such an influence on her life, especially in Rise of Skywalker. Leia became very important to her, and I think she realized that the Skywalker name meant, the Skywalkers fought Palpatine for so long. Palpatine was the evil that she was trying not to become, and I think I don't think it's so much that she's labeling herself a Skywalker because of that. I think it's because she's seeing the fact that she chose a side. It's like symbolism. She's saying, I'm Rey Skywalker. I am the good. I am not the evil. I am not Palpatine. I'm forgetting the past. And I will say, that moment comes on screen, and believe it or not, when that line came up, I was, in my brain, I was like, say it. Say it. And when she said it, I went like this, and goosebumps went all over my body.
I was next to him.
Mike,
I was next to him.
I'll tell you what,
Mike jumped out of his seat.
I think they were like, cut, that's a wrap. Great job, everybody. And then they're like, guys, didn't we call this The Rise of Skywalker? And they were like, oh. crap.
So part of the reason that I brought up the question about Rey's parents and what's canon is because if in the novelization, because I feel like part of the equation for me of what she should take on as a name is the identity of her parents, because she is less defined, I feel like, by her grandfather than she is by whatever we know of her parents. Like she's casting off not only her grandfather's name but also her parents' name.
Well, she defends them too, right? Because I think it's the second one, The Last Jedi, where Kylo Ren tells her parents discarded her like trash, and
for
she's
drinking
like,
money.
No, they didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, which I don't know if was he telling the truth there? Did they ever confirm that? Or
well, my point was that she contests against that claim, she says no, they'll come back, and so yeah,
huh.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where I'm almost kind of glad the saga ends on that moment. To me, I was very satisfied by that.
I would have been equally as pleased with her like opening her mouth and taking a breath to say who she was and just cutting right there.
That would have been better.
That would have been okay. Yeah.
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been even more pleased if after she buried the lightsaber, it panned up and the last thing we saw was a yellowish tinge to her eyes, and then it fades out.
Ooh, there you go.
Well, the big debate with the ending too is, and I sent you guys this video, didn't I, with all the different Force ghosts and how all of them appeared. First of all, that should have been how it went. That's number one. And from what I've heard, the director's cut, they did shoot those.
It's awesome, Dan.
The director's cut would contain those if they do them. Which, by the way, the director's cut, from what I'm hearing, is going to come out in 2022 on Disney Plus if it remains true.
Yeah.
But
so I'll tell you what, any director's cut mention, I would have been like, no, not happening. But since
that one,
the Snyder cut is getting released,
mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a new era of movies. Maybe it's like COVID movies where they're like, heck, we'll just
do
it.
Yeah. Might as well do it.
Yeah, it's one of those good things. It's one of those things where I'm hoping that happens. I want to see more of those moments. But the big thing about the ending is people said that when they showed Luke and Leia at the end, Kylo should have actually been there in Force Ghost as well. Because, I mean, think of it like the end of Return of the Jedi. Anakin appears there because he was redeemed. So why wasn't Kylo next to his mother and his uncle as well?
Because he is inside of Rey.
I heard that theory. They said that's part of the reason why she also said she was a Skywalker too, because part of Ren lives in her.
Well, if they are a dyad, like I keep going back to that word, but like they are 2 in 1, and so maybe she is a Skywalker. Maybe she doesn't even have parents.
Huh.
Again, there's a lot of.
We're getting a little bit strange here.
Maybe
netherworlds of the Force.
Kylo Ren's nose was twice the original size, and a piece of it fell off, and it formed into Rey.
No.
Here's a question I had watching again this most recent time: why was she scratching tick marks on the scav ship that she was residing in?
How many days her parents left her, I think.
Right, so she remembers her parents?
Well, she was probably about 5 or 6 years old from the flashbacks. She remembers that moment, so I think she remembers them to a degree, but you think she'd remember the situation that they were in, though.
Right. Yeah, and so that's where I think, again, the disjointed storyline, the Rey in The Force Awakens knew a lot more about her parents than the Rey in The Last Jedi. She was like,
yeah.
I mean, if you're saying you want to go back to the planet because your parents are coming back, that doesn't seem like just aimless hope if you're scratching away.
Well, you know what? I have this live article right now explaining that Palpatine has a Force amnesia on Rey throughout the entire series.
Wait,
How about that?
really?
Does that work? No.
Oh, I was like,
wow.
I mean,
Force amnesia.
Oh, that goes back to that discussion we had about Anakin having a spell over Padme.
Oh,
you remember that?
Yeah,
Jeez.
I don't like that. I don't
almost
like
had
that
you there,
theory.
Dan. I almost had you.
Yeah, but really?
How have we not mentioned Babu Frick?
Uh,
Oh yeah, we didn't mention Babu
Wait,
Frick.
was that a scoff?
no, I like Babu Frick.
Oh, okay.
Oh, for a minute there, I was like, "What? You don't like Babu Frick? Who doesn't like Babu Frick?"
He's funny.
Well, if there's a place to speak against him, Al, clearly this isn't it.
This is not the forum, I guess.
No, I've no qualms with Babu Frick, but though that does lead to, I think, a question we usually dive into, which is most favorite and least favorite parts of the trilogy.
One thing I wanted to bring up before we get into that was just little brief comments on Rogue One and Solo, because we haven't talked about those.
Yeah, I'll keep my
Brief
Solo
thoughts.
comment really brief. I haven't
Oh, boy.
seen it yet.
Oh no!
Ooh,
Yeah.
Solo needs a sequel.
yes.
It was so
Yes.
I don't know what it was, but I just never watched it. Yeah.
It took
Give
me
it
a
a
while
watch.
to get up the courage to watch it, but after I watched it, I thoroughly enjoy it.
I also have not loved Emilia Clarke outside of her role as Daenerys Targaryen. I didn't like her as Sarah Connor.
No, she didn't fit the role.
I would say don't focus on her character in Solo.
No.
It's not worth it to get invested.
Sure.
No.
So yeah,
movie's very underrated. It's very underrated. Solo was a lot better. It got a lot of bad press just because it came out so close to Last Jedi and because there was a lot of backlash with Last Jedi. The movie is actually very good, and it deserves a sequel. And it has a little bit of that prequel touch to it, but it also has some of that original trilogy touch to it. It's kind of a mixture of both.
That's a pretty cool endorsement.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
I like Solo. I watched it this last week, and I really like this movie.
I do too. I love it.
The guy who plays Han is fantastic at it.
That's cool.
And
that's
then
cool.
Donald Glover, I think that's what it was, plays
Lando. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
I
that
did
is
like
the
him a lot.
perfect young Lando right there.
Well, I don't think I've seen him in anything that I've disliked.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Dan, I think you're gonna like Solo.
That's cool. I'll keep my review of Rogue One as equally brief. It is the best Star Wars film.
It's the
I do
perfect
like it.
Star Wars film.
I will say it is so well made. The way it's shot, it kind of has that I want to say almost like a Saving Private Ryan kind of look to it.
Oh,
It just
that's good.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. I love just everything about it. And the director of it, which is Gareth Edwards, he did the most recent Godzilla remake.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that.
I want him to do another Star Wars movie. I do because he understood the universe.
That's the point. He took a very challenging chronological position between the two, like almost contested trilogies. You either love the prequels, but it just fit so nicely, and his fan service was so delicate. I get that there's some people have issues with the guys that were on Tatooine.
The guys at the bar and
and I get people are like, how does that chronology work? How did they escape? But aside from that, I loved how they introduced all these characters. They introduced non-force sensitive Jedi religion members in Chirrut Imwe, my favorite Star Wars character. I just loved it. I thought it was so good.
Thoughts on Vader's portrayal at the end?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Badass.
I get chills every single time I watch that scene. I get chills, and the music just fuels it even further.
Well, one of the things that I think the original trilogy misses is the fight choreography is very weak. And so that should be Vader in his most deadly. He's realized his power. He's lost everything that's important to him.
I have to bring it up. He didn't go back to Mustafar to charge his batteries.
Oh, that explanation.
Get out of here.
That is the one problem with that scene, is that why is Vader so aggressive and quick there, but in A New Hope, he's fighting Obi-Wan like, ugh.
Yeah, because it's fight choreography. it's the emphasis that we've placed in a new era of movie making. I mean, if you think about it, fighting used to be a genre of movie, like martial arts films, but now in almost any movie you have fight choreographers, you have mixed martial artists coming in to be the villains, you have people spending months doing fitness regimen, and sometimes people are selected for little else other than their fitness and physical prowess to adopt into roles. Like when Stephen Amell was going to be the Green Arrow, you know, what was he known for except on his Instagram he was just training all the time and getting as fit as he could, and that's an element that I think enhances movies. I love that.
I think
so
the
fact
reason
that
the reason that the older trilogy it lacks in that the fight choreography is because they were so limited in their editing with the lightsabers. The lightsabers was what held them back. Because after that, then you look at the prequels and they're flying all over the place.
Well, they're beautiful in the prequels.
I think Vader was
kind of stuff back then.
I think he was just trying to humiliate Kenobi by not going all out on him and still defeating him.
Toying with his mind. You're an
well,
old
so
person.
that remake that you sent me, Alistair, was
the remake
amazing.
Is so good.
Yeah.
I love that remake.
That fight reimagined. Yeah,
I would
that
love
could be put in the movie.
I would love the original trilogy reimagined. And the only guidelines would be don't change any
Greedo shooting first.
You know what? I think Greedo did shoot first.
Oh boy!
So I skipped.
That's the debate we were missing in original trilogy. That was the one.
At first I was like, okay, which is it? I love a stiff cannon, and then I realized, okay, who better to decide it than George Lucas? But then it wasn't the original, and
but George wavered.
Yeah, well,
he did.
His explanation that Han is a scoundrel, yes, but he still carries the cowboy aspect of he's not going to initiate the violence, but he is good enough to end it, or something like that. Like he only reached for his gun because Greedo was going to shoot. But I don't know. I just liked that explanation. I thought it added honor to Han's name that I appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Alistair's favorite part. Favorite moments of the sequel trilogy and the worst moment of the sequel trilogy. I don't know who wants to go first. I mean, it might be interesting how this is going to go.
I'm not going to go first. There's no way.
I don't think I want to go first either.
Well, I can at least give my favorite moment is kind of Rey's unveiling when she grabs when Kylo goes to grab the lightsaber and it flies past his face and it goes right into Rey's hand, and then the Force theme comes in. That's probably one of my, if not my favorite, definitely one of my top favorite moments of the entire trilogy. Wow. A lot of nostalgia, and it's just really cool to see Rey coming into her own there.
Yeah.
Least favorite, I won't go with a line this time. I think my least favorite I think my least favorite is the utter lack of development to the acquiring of Luke's lightsaber by Maz. Yep. That really bothered me.
They never explained that. Like,
just
how
that
did she
she
get that
had
saber?
it in a box.
Yeah, just that she randomly had that Rey happened to find it. They happened to be in the exact planet they needed to be for her to find it. It was just all those were one of those moments where I'm like, okay, the 20 minutes on the casino planet could have been spent on this.
Sure.
Well, Maz gets no screen time hardly at all in Last Jedi, and that kind of pissed me off because I wanted to know more about her because JJ spent time kind of developing her, and we never really got more after Force Awakens because Rise of Skywalker even was very, very small.
Well, she was in a fight.
She was in a fight the whole time. That could have been the casino planet.
They tried calling her.
She was enter excuse.
Right.
Pretty much.
Gosh. I can't go yet. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm struggling.
I'm gonna still stick with my favorite character, Finn, in The Force Awakens, when they're infiltrating Starkiller Base, and he just comes up with the line, we use the Force, and Han goes, "That's not how the Force works."
That's classic.
That is classic. That's a good moment.
That was my favorite Finn moment right there.
Yeah.
Least favorite.
Oh boy.
Least favorite.
Okay, my favorite.
Think about it.
I have two things, so I don't know if this is cheating. I just can't think of one only. I loved the scene where Ben killed his dad. That is such a powerful scene for me. Yeah. And I remember a criticism coming up afterward that was, why didn't Chewbacca save Han and kill Ben? And then a fan released this comic of Chewbacca looking at Ben through the arc blaster and then remembering growing up with him and like helping him through his struggles as like a companion to him. And I've got goosebumps right now. It added so much that we missed of the relationship of the Solos and the Skywalkers, and that was, Chewbacca didn't want to kill Ben just as much as Han didn't want to kill Ben in that moment. And it just solidified it. Amazing.
Another thing that people brought up is that they were talking about how when Kylo was fighting both Rey and Finn, that he couldn't take them all on. And I keep going back to the one story that just shows, okay, they showcased Chewie's bowcaster as being a very powerful weapon, like knocking stormtroopers on their ass. Yeah. And Ben took that blast to the gut. So he's hurting through that whole thing.
Yeah.
And people were like, well, why can't Ben and why can't he take them out? He was struggling to stand. Right. He was using everything just to walk over to them.
Right.
Yeah, I do agree with you. That's a pretty good scene.
And then the other one is more of a motif, but I really liked any moment where Rey was struggling with the dark side, and I think my love of that theme came to fruition when she used Force lightning on that ship, and it was such a startling moment, and in the theater it was so loud, and just she was shocked by it. And so I just thought, man, they really did this well too. Just her struggling with literally that power inside of her. So I couldn't pick just one, but least favorite for me, I didn't dislike the casino scene as much as I thought I would this time around, just mostly because of that little guy sticking coins in a BB-8. I was like, that was pretty funny. I'm like, this is funny. And I love Justin Theroux, and he had a cameo in that scene. And so I think I'm going to have to go with any time when they took the humor too far, like when Finn is like, droid please, it broke the immersion of the movie for me. The same thing happened in Black Panther when they started quoting like meme phrases like, what are those, and like whip my hair back and forth, just this it was just this, pulled me out of the immersiveness of the movie and reminded me like, these are writers writing things for these people to say, and it breaks the immersion for me. And when you start to think like, oh, I'm watching a movie and this is scripted, that does it for me. So
I'm actually going to come back in and say my least favorite moment with something like that. When Finn wakes up in The Last Jedi and he's just walking down the hallway in that suit leaking all that kind of stuff, I felt like that was kind of a moment that really took away from the film too.
Unnecessary.
It was unnecessary. It was humor that didn't need to be there because it was a tense situation. Yeah. And from that point on, I knew that Finn was not going to be used the way that he should have been throughout the rest of the series.
Yeah.
It was a joke after that.
There was, Dan, you mentioned this earlier, and I think that I agree that there was an opportunity for Finn to be like a kind of a martyr, like a self-sacrificing character when he was going towards the cannon.
Yeah.
And I was watching for it the time I watched it recently to see how I felt knowing what was about to happen, and I still feel like I would have probably actually enjoyed his character becoming a martyr there. And
that's sick, Al. The way you say that sounds sick. No, I agree though. It's like, okay, you saved him for what?
Right.
Because you had a character that we fell in love with. We fell in love with his honesty, with the courage it took to defect from the stormtroopers. What did you save him for?
Right.
If to just discard him as like a 2D character by the end,
he was just a grunt. That's all he was. He was a resistance grunt that kept it, even in the third movie.
Friends.
He was friends with Rey. Yeah,
My
he was.
friends.
It's funny. I sent you guys a link of like the honest trailer for Rise of Skywalker. His character was boiled down to trying to stay involved with everybody who was important. Like he's like, no, you shouldn't come with. It's too dangerous. We're all in this together. This is all of us. We're all here.
Yeah.
Like it was so secondary and it was so bad.
And I think to your point, Al, the times when characters stay dead, or when things are really rough, or when you see terror and pain, they give the moments where the jokes are more welcome, and I think Marvel just nails that balance where, you've got characters in the height of existential dread as they disappear in the same scene as like, Star-Lord imitating Thor's voice, and you welcome those breaks because the rest of it is just so heavy. And so maybe if they didn't blunt the moments that could have been tougher to deal with, like Chewbacca's death, C-3PO's death, Finn's death, Rose's death, like all those things that could have brought more of a depth to it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Finn should have died in that moment. That was a deserved death scene for him. And the fact of the matter, he's not given a whole lot of stuff to do in Rise of Skywalker where he really was necessary.
Right.
So, I mean, him dying there would have been a pretty big moment. It would have been a big turnaround moment for the trilogy to make, and that's where I think Rian Johnson screwed up.
Yeah. Or can the romance with Ren and explore the ship with Finn and Rey and have him be Force sensitive. They could have gone any which way, but they just didn't give him a moment and then just shuffled him off.
I also don't like the space horses in Rise of Skywalker where they're just riding across the Star Destroyer. That
felt like the moment in Canto Bight riding on the animals. It was kind of one of those moments. I didn't like that scene in Rise or Last Jedi at all.
I think for me it was just another instance of a peek at something that could have been more developed, but since it wasn't, I was lost on its larger impact.
Yeah, very much so. My favorite and least moments. Oh boy, let's see. Well, surprisingly enough, one of my favorite moments, I got two, is going to come out. One of them's going to come out of Last Jedi. I very much like the beginning space battle. I think it was very well done when they're taking down the dreadnought and with the bombers and stuff like that. It felt like a very classic space battle out of the original trilogy. I felt like that was a great way to open the film, and that really got me at the beginning of that movie. I loved that part so much, and I always go back to that as being one of my favorites. The other moment probably would have to come out of Rise of Skywalker. I like the scene where Rey enters the Death Star and goes into the throne room, and the Emperor's theme builds in the background. And it's a very nostalgic moment. And especially when she goes inside, sees the mirror, sees the dark version of herself, and then it leads into that battle with Ren. It's just a very nostalgic moment, and I go back to that being one of my favorite ones, too. Least favorite moment, I got two of those as well. One, I don't like when Luke throws the lightsaber over the edge in Last Jedi.
Sure.
I do not like that.
A little bit too flippant. Yeah.
it just felt like a Disney moment. It just felt forced.
Yeah.
It just felt like, oh, this will be something people don't expect, and it just
Yeah,
didn't feel
yeah.
like Luke.
Yeah.
And then probably, the scene on Canto Bight when they're riding the animals. I think there was some bad CG there too. It looked really fake. And
Those were cute though.
If only that was enough to justify it. That's actually, to be honest, out of the whole trilogy, that scene probably has some of the worst CG that I've seen in the whole saga. It just looks bad.
Whole
They could cut that
saga.
scene out.
Come on.
The only other thing I could point out that looks just as bad as the stormtroopers on the animals in A New Hope Special Edition.
Gungan. You think Gungan City looks better than that?
Okay, that's in the top 3. That's right behind.
Now,
it.
maybe
Okay,
if there was
fine.
some way to adjust for the advances in technology, like when you adjust for inflation or something, but
Mm-hmm.
I will say, sorry, that's one thing I liked about this trilogy. There wasn't a side civilization that was going to come and help them out at the last minute sort of thing. It was.
I was hoping the porgs would.
I knew you were going to bring up the porgs, Alister.
Although porgs can fly, I guess I didn't catch that the first time.
So actually, you know why they had to do that? Because when they were filming on that island, there were so many pelicans around that they had to see. The only way they could do it was to CGI the porgs in, because otherwise it was going to be too hard for them to CGI the pelicans out.
Why don't they just keep the pelicans in?
I don't know. I guess they just didn't think it was Star Warsy enough.
You know what? I like the porgs.
Yeah, me too.
The porgs are fine. You know who we didn't mention, and I'm surprised. There's so much hate. Nobody mentioned Rose.
Oh, I liked Rose.
I like Rose too. I don't have a problem.
What I didn't like Rose was
Wait, who?
It was strange that she diminished in prominence quite a bit in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
that was odd.
That's the thing, is that she was such a serious character, and I loved the concept of her character. It was just like Finn, thrown away in the next installment. It was just you have all these new characters and then you do nothing with them. It doesn't feel.
She'll have her own
put your effort
TV show.
Yeah, I feel like my only problem with those characters was that nothing became of them.
Mm-hmm.
Too many throwaways.
Yeah. And again, I think that's just the disjointed nature of this trilogy. Maybe J.J. Abrams felt like there was too much to undo, that they didn't have time to further develop it,
which is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to the director's cut. I heard there was more scenes with Rose in the director's cut.
That would be cool.
I mean, this is a cut that I think that is going to be just as much wanted as that Snyder cut. I think it's going to be very interesting. And that Snyder cut, by the way, I am so ready to see that cut, because I don't have a problem so much with that Justice League version, but
I haven't seen it.
Wait for the Snyder cut. I would just wait at this point.
Sure. Well, I saw Batman vs Superman and I hated it so much.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't pay attention to that movie.
Did you see the ultimate cut?
No.
It's much better.
The one I couldn't watch was Suicide Squad, which is crazy because I love the DC universe, and I was like neck deep in the Arkham games, because the Batman games, the video games, are phenomenal. Injustice did a great storyline, and so I came to these DC movies expecting, I guess, like Dark Knight caliber stuff, and it just.
I actually had this discussion with my wife. Is that DC does really well with TV, while Marvel does really good with movies.
I agree with that statement.
Because I love the CW
Arrowverse. So do I.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so great.
Did you guys love Smallville when it was on?
I stopped watching it eventually, but we watched that as a family, I feel like, for a long time until we got rid of cable.
Surprisingly, Smallville's still my all-time favorite series. I grew up with that show, and I fell in love with it, and I still watch it today. It's so good.
I haven't seen it.
Really?
I haven't seen Smallville.
Oh, it's very cool because they do the whole like Superman coming of age, and so he experiences powers and like, how do I control these? And I highly recommend it.
Okay.
Gosh,
Absolutely.
it's got like what, 10 seasons?
10 seasons,
Really?
218 episodes.
At least the first 4 are amazing, and then I don't know why I stopped watching it.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely worth it. I mean, like seasons 1 through 4 are like his high school years, and then it gets into the Superman lore into 5, and then starts building up to him becoming Superman at 10.
That's cool.
So,
yeah, I need to go back to that one.
But
Anyways,
okay,
Star Wars.
so
Rose brought us here because she was such a non-starter character.
I'm telling you, our next podcast series should either be Marvel or DC, because we're already getting into that conversation.
I would love to do Marvel. The Marvel series I've seen more than any series we've talked about, except maybe Lord of the Rings, but it's starting to rival it because I will rewatch them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I might have to join you on that one.
There's only 23 films, Al. You can.
Oh, I've seen them all.
Oh, okay. Cool.
All right, so
Yeah.
we'll set it in stone now. Marvel it is. It'll be Marvel.
So we should.
Marvel.
I think we should keep. We need. Well, this. It's not a talk for right now, but yeah, we'll
discuss when we turn it off. We'll,
yeah.
I hate Marvel.
Oh no.
I'm just kidding.
You need to leave. You need to leave.
Can you imagine if you just had one person coming in and throwing out all these terrible arguments against all the Marvel films?
If you look hard enough, we probably could find somebody. I'd love to throw him in there with all of us because he'd be thrown into the fire big time. Okay, so our final scores for the sequel trilogy, and we'll throw in even the scores for Rogue One and Solo.
Solo score N/A.
We'll revisit it somehow, somewhere.
Rogue One 11. We're on a 1 to 10,
Lord of the
right?
Rings caliber! Holy crap!
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was so good, and I think part of it too was all my coworkers tore it apart, and so I felt this like contrarian need to defend it, and ended up just bolstering my love for it in true confirmation bias fashion. So 11, and then 7, 8, and 9. I will say, I'll say 7. No, is that too low? Hold on, let me think of the Force Awakens. I'm gonna say 8, 9, 8.
8, 9? Okay.
But it's so arbitrary. I don't know.
Okay. Solo, I'll give an 8 to Solo. Rogue One, 11. I was planning on saying 11 before you even did it. It is the perfect Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Okay, 7, 8, 9. I will give. It was going to be 8, 8, and 5.
Ooh.
What? Oh wow!
Ouch.
Sorry.
Okay. Now my heart hurts. Okay.
Maybe it's
Go ahead,
7,
Al.
7.
So I cannot, in good faith, give an 11 to Rogue One and allow it to top the Lord of the Rings films in my mind.
Who said
so
top?
I will. I will give it a 10. It is on par with my love for the Lord of the Rings films. Solo, I will give a 5. Force Awakens 7, Last Jedi 6, Rise of Skywalker 6.5.
Okay, where were you when we were talking about Solo? And everyone was telling me I had to watch it.
I'm shocked by your Solo score.
I was minding my own business.
I'll tell you what, I hate rating movies on a numeric scale.
It can be tough.
I remember when Netflix had the 4 or 5 star rating system or whatever. You guys have no idea how many times I went through and cleared all my ratings and redid them. I just suck at ratings.
Yeah. But yeah, Al, you got to tell us though about the Solo thing real quick, because I got to know why.
I mean,
What is your deal?
I enjoyed. I will say this. What I enjoyed about Solo was that it contributed a decent amount to lore. Like I came out with a better understanding of the background of like
Question.
how Chewie met, how Han and Lando met. What was the question?
I was just gonna say, by the end of Solo, will I know Chewie's life debt to
Yeah.
Han?
Yes,
Okay.
you will know all
Yeah,
that.
you'll cut.
That's
Yeah,
all
you'll
I
definitely.
really want to go away from the film with.
Yeah,
You will also see the Kessel Run.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's
Yep.
predictable. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I enjoyed its contribution to my. I came away with a fuller understanding of the Star Wars universe.
Mhm.
I just didn't enjoy the story. That was all.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I can,
Oh,
I
that
can
was
just
understand that.
Well, then, boy,
Well,
I'm
we all think you're dumb. I think, right, guys?
Ooh. Wow. I don't know if I would have gone that far, but okay.
I did enjoy the actors. The actors that played Lando and Han. I did enjoy them. As
Lon and Hando.
Lon and
Hando.
I think
Actually, Hondo's a character from Clone Wars.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't gotten that far yet, I don't think.
I'd have to say this episode, the scruffy-looking nerf herder is definitely Alistair.
Yep.
His hatred for Solo.
He's really gonna find my Solo score interesting now. Then, oh boy.
11.
Okay, well, okay. So Rogue One, 11. Rogue One is just a fantastic film from beginning to end. It's just fantastic. Other than maybe Leia's CGI at the end, that could have been a little better. But other than that,
Oh, see, I liked that.
Mhm.
I thought it could be a little bit
I like
better.
that.
I liked the scene.
I
just
do
thought it could be a
agree.
little
It
better.
wasn't as good as Tarkin. You could definitely tell that it was CG.
Yeah.
Mm.
Solo, here it comes. 9.
Mm.
9.
I-
I love Solo.
Anakin, you're going down a path I can't follow.
That's not in the Solo film.
No, I'm just saying Mike's going down a path I can't follow with the 9.
Force Awakens.
Here's where we sit and pretend Mike's not going to say 10, 9, 10.
Well, like I've told you, I give them all 10s in general. But I'm gonna be fair. I'm gonna be.
I know. Yeah, I'm the same with rating. It's so hard.
I'll give Force Awakens an 8, and the only reason why I do that, and it's a little bit lower, is just because some of the rehashes of A New Hope are in there, and that's a little bit,
Interesting.
for it. Last Jedi. Before we started this podcast, I would have given it a lot lower of a score, but I told Alistair the one day he was over that I started watching Last Jedi, and I started getting a little bit of a newfound respect for it a little bit. So I'm actually going to give. I'm tossing up Last Jedi between 7 and 8. I'm going to say 7 because of some of the Luke choices.
Mm.
And then Rise of Skywalker. I like some of the nostalgia, so I'll go with probably about an 8 on that too. So 8, 7, 8 on the sequel trilogy, and then 9 for Solo and 11 for Rogue One. So
Cool.
See, everyone's just gonna see me as the villain of these things because I'm just Rise of Skywalker.
As long as you don't give any ones, Jeremy, I won't contest.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be weird if we had
Bless you.
something that fell that low.
Bless you.
That's you.
Yeah, you got some bless yous, hon.
Don't apologize.
Well, all in all, that concludes the Star Wars podcast. Wow, that was quite the journey, guys.
That was
9
fun.
movies. That was a lot of fun.
It was good.
Yeah.
11 movies.
Oh, yeah, 11. You're right. 11 movies.
Are we going to do The Mandalorian?
Yeah, that starts right now. Another
That's a
hour.
whole-
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Another hour of The Mandalorian coming up.
Mandalorian.
Maybe down the road we should do one dedicated to TV. That'd be an interesting
Be
thing
good.
to connect it all. So I think we're all in agreement then. So Marvel then, I guess.
Yeah.
Go
Be
down
next.
Marvel.
One cast and all 23?
No.
No.
Rank all 23.
I think this is a conversation we need to have after we end the podcast.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll just tell the listeners that the Marvel Universe will be next, and I think all four of us are returning. So I'm glad to have you guys on board, and we'll continue these conversations.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thanks Mike.
Guys. And thanks, everyone, for listening. And, well, may the Force be with you.
And also with you.
Indeed.
My boy. I have been every voice you have ever heard inside your head.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic, before the Dark Times, before the Empire. I was once a Jedi Knight, the same as your father.
I wish I'd known him.
And he was a good friend.
How did my father die?
A young Jedi named Darth Vader. He betrayed and murdered your father. Vader was seduced by the dark side of the Force.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Stop now! Come back! I love you!
Liar! I have failed you, Anakin. This is the end for you, my master.
Lord Vader, rise. Yes, Master. Where is Padme? Is she safe? Is she all right?
I know. There's good in him.
We have a new enemy. He could destroy us.
He's just a boy.
I feel the good in you, the conflict.
There is no conflict. Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
You were the chosen one!
For many years there was balance, and then I saw Ben.
There's no light left in Kylo Ren. We need the Jedi Order back. We need Luke Skywalker.
We lost our son forever.
There's still light in him, I know it.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
Hey, Luke, thanks. Thanks for coming after me.
You have a power I don't understand.
You have that power too.
That boy is our last hope.
No, there is another.
At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge.
Long have I waited. And now, you're coming together. Your journey, here's its end.